I spent years thinking I was broken, until one person did something so small it shattered every lie I grew up believing. Now my entire past feels like a trap meant to keep me quiet. For most of my life, I believed pain was just part of existing. Not in the poetic, dramatic sense, I mean the type of pain that lingers in your bones long after the bruises fade. The kind you learn to live around, like a limp that no one sees unless you trip. I thought that was normal. That it was what love looked like when it got tired. I didn't realize I had built my identity around surviving people who were supposed to care for me. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. One of those towns where everyone knows your name, but no one knows your story. My parents were what you'd call pillar of the community types. My father worked as an assistant principal at the local high school, stern, respected, the kind of man other men called old school like it was a badge of honor. My mother taught piano from home. Always smiling, always serving something, cookies, lemonade, praise for anyone but her own children. We looked like the kind of family you'd see on a church flyer. But at home, things were different. Quiet wasn't peaceful, it was tense. Conversations weren't discussions, they were briefings, instructions, threats wrapped in politeness. We weren't allowed to cry. That was weakness. My dad believed emotions were manipulations. My mom believed in pretending. And I, the middle child, became very good at both. My siblings and I developed this game when we were kids. We'd write notes to each other in a made-up code, a sort of language we pieced together over the years. It was the only way we could express things we weren't allowed to say aloud. Simple stuff at first, are you okay? He's in a mood today, hide in the attic. But over time, it became how we remembered we weren't alone. My older sister, Tara, was the mastermind behind it. My younger brother, Evan, was our loyal translator. I kept the notes, hundreds of them, folded like origami, hidden in a shoebox under a loose floorboard in my closet. We didn't call it abuse. We didn't have that language yet. We called it rules. Rules about how to stand, how to speak, what not to say. We learned to disappear before we were told to. We knew the sound of footsteps and what mood came with them. We joked about it in whispers, because humor was the only rebellion we could afford. The turning point came when I was 17. It was early winter, cold enough that the windows had that fog you could write your name in. I came home from school to find my father waiting at the kitchen table with a stack of our notes. He had found the shoebox. He didn't say anything at first, just gestured for me to sit. Then he started reading the notes out loud, slowly, like he was narrating a trial. Each word landed like a hammer. He asked who wrote them. I said nothing. He slapped the table, asked again. I lied and said I made them up. All of them. He stared at me for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. So you're inventing languages now? What are you, crazy? Then he stood, and he hit me. It wasn't the first time. But this time, it was different. Not in how hard he struck me, but in how long he stood afterward, watching. As if he expected me to thank him. The next day, I went to school with a swollen cheek and what I thought was a cracked rib. The nurse called CPS. My father was ready for them. He told them I had a connective tissue disorder. Showed them old medical records I'd never seen. Said the bruises were spontaneous hematomas, a symptom of my condition. He even convinced a doctor friend of his to back him up. The case was closed in a week. That was when I stopped believing in adults. But what he didn't know, what he never even thought to check, was that the new security cameras he'd installed around the house 6 months earlier. I had figured out how to access the feeds. He thought they were one-way, tools to control us. I turned them into weapons. I started collecting footage, clips of his lectures, his threats, the casual violence, the gaslighting. Some of it subtle, some of it undeniable. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just knew I needed to have it. It became my second language, this silent archive of truth. The person who changed everything wasn't a therapist. Wasn't a friend. It was my college roommate, Jonah. He was the kind of guy who noticed things without making you feel like you were being observed. He noticed I flinched when someone raised their voice. He noticed I never left my door unlocked. He noticed I watched people's hands more than their eyes. One night, we were talking about dumb family stories and I slipped. I mentioned the floorboard box. He asked what that was. I froze. Then I told him everything. Not everything, everything, just enough to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. He listened like it was a documentary. No pity, no disbelief, just presence. Then he said, "You know that's not normal, right?" That's when it hit me. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the broken one. Maybe I had been shaped by something that wasn't supposed to shape anyone. A week later, I showed him the footage. And he cried. He cried harder than I ever had. That moment was the crack in the wall. After that, everything started unraveling. Not fast, like erosion, not explosion. He helped me organize the files. Helped me find a pro bono legal clinic that specialized in emotional abuse and coercive environments. Helped me build a case I didn't even know I was allowed to build. My father was arrested on 3 counts of child endangerment and 2 counts of falsifying medical records. My mother left town a week later. Said she needed space from the drama. My siblings, Tara and Evan, came forward after that. Turns out they'd kept their own versions of the archive. We weren't alone. We never had been. And now, years later, my father writes me letters from a halfway house. He says he's in therapy now. He says he understands the damage. He asks why we betrayed him. Why we turned on family. I never respond. Because he still thinks this was about betrayal. But it wasn't. It was about finally understanding that love should not require silence. And pain is not proof that you're alive. It's proof that something is wrong. He sent 6 letters that first year. Handwritten in his stiff, sharp script, the kind that always looked like it belonged on a report card or a detention slip. Each one tried a different tactic. The first was confusion. I don't understand what I did to deserve this. The second was guilt. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Are you proud of that? By the third, he tried anger. You've ruined my life for attention. You always were dramatic. After that, the letters grew more desperate, more fragile. He talked about being cold, about not sleeping, about how none of the other men in the halfway house spoke to him. They look at me like I'm something sick, he wrote. That was the one that almost got me to reply. Almost. But Jonah stopped me. He said something I still repeat to myself sometimes: don't mistake someone's loneliness for your responsibility. I needed to hear that. Because for most of my life, I had been taught that my role in other people's stories was to hold their guilt so they wouldn't have to. To take on their shame so they could stay clean. That if someone hurt me, it was probably my fault for making them feel that way. That I was too sensitive. Too complicated. Too much. Jonah didn't try to fix me. He didn't offer affirmations or cliches. He offered evidence. The kind you can hold in your hands. The kind that, once seen, can't be unseen. We printed out stills from the security footage. Labeled them. Organized them by date and room. I remember holding a photo of my dad raising his hand in the living room, frozen in time, his mouth mid-shout, my brother's head turned away just before the hit. I remember how cold the print felt in my hands, even though it had just come from the printer. I remember shaking, not from fear, from validation. There's a kind of nausea that comes from being believed after so long being told you're lying. After my father was convicted, our lawyer warned us about the aftermath. That even when people go to prison, the emotional reckoning doesn't end there. He was right. I spent months waking up expecting my father to be standing in the doorway. I had dreams where he sat on the edge of my bed, asking me calmly why I hated him. I'd wake up sweating, shaking, unable to move. Jonah would stay awake with me some nights, just sitting, not talking. The first time I visited my hometown after everything went public, I expected silence. Cold shoulders, maybe even confrontation. What I got was far stranger. People were polite, almost too polite, like they were walking on eggshells around a person they used to watch sing in the church youth choir. Some of them wouldn't look me in the eye. Others overcompensated. We always knew something wasn't right. One woman said at the grocery store, grabbing my arm. We just didn't want to assume. But the worst reaction came from Pastor James. He had baptized me when I was 8. Visited our house every Christmas. I passed him on Main Street and he stopped me. Gave me that small, rehearsed smile. You know, forgiveness is powerful, he said. I said nothing, just stared at him. He nodded, like he expected that. I'll be praying for you. That was the day I realized how much of my upbringing had been based on performance. We weren't a family, we were a stage play. My father was the director. My mother was wardrobe. We were all just actors pretending we weren't bleeding behind the curtain. The strangest part? There were still moments I missed it. The routine, the predictability, the way pain at least felt familiar. Trauma, I've learned, isn't just a wound, it's a compass that keeps pointing you back to what hurt you, because at least you understand it. Jonah helped me find a new compass. I started therapy, not the soft kind with candles and how do you feel questions. Real therapy, the kind that made me face the lies I'd absorb like second skin. The belief that I was a burden. The belief that I was only loved when I was useful. The belief that love could be withheld like punishment. One session stands out. My therapist asked me, if your father had never been caught, do you think you'd still believe he loved you? I answered too fast, yes. Then I broke down, because somewhere deep down, I still wanted him to be capable of love. Real love, not conditional compliance, not performance-based affection, just love. That was the moment I realized forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about cutting the rope they tied to your ankle so you stop dragging them with you. I haven't spoken to my father since the trial. I don't plan to. I've kept the letters, though, in a box labeled evidence, not memories. Sometimes I reread them when I start to feel like maybe I imagined it all. They remind me I didn't. As for my siblings, Tara lives in Colorado now. Teaches art to elementary kids. She signs her emails in our old code, symbols only we understand. Evan works in IT in Chicago. He's quiet, still doesn't talk much about those years. But he's started writing short stories. I read one last month that made me cry. It was about a boy who builds a machine to go back in time and tell his younger self, "You're not crazy. You're surviving." And Jonah? We're still friends, closer than ever. Sometimes I think about how random it was, getting placed with him as a roommate. What if it had been someone else? Someone who didn't notice, someone who didn't care. But then again, maybe that's the point. Sometimes the smallest kindness, a question, a pause, a quiet kind of attention, can break the loudest chains. And sometimes the person who finally shows you what you deserve isn't a hero or a savior. They're just someone who sees you. Really sees you. For the first time, the spring after my father's sentencing, I went back to the house. Not to live, not even to retrieve anything. Just to see it. The county had seized the property as part of the settlement, and it sat on the edge of Maple Street like a gutted memory. The yard was overgrown. The shutters on the east side hung crooked, flapping in the wind like tired eyelids. The swing my brother once fell off of creaked lazily in the breeze. I stood on the sidewalk across the street for nearly 20 minutes before stepping foot on the lawn. My hands were shaking. I think I expected some kind of emotional collapse. Maybe anger, maybe panic, but what I felt most was distance. Like I was observing someone else's tragedy. A ghost revisiting a place it no longer haunted. The door was locked, but I still had the old back gate code. 1984. The year my father graduated high school. He'd used it for everything. Security, bank cards, even the garage. It beeped, and I pushed the gate open, the sound of the hinges louder than it should have been. Inside, it was stripped. No furniture, no photos, no carpet. The living room had a single folding chair and a stack of dust-covered newspapers in the corner. The dining room still had the outline of a rug burned into the hardwood, the only remnant of family dinners where no one spoke unless spoken to. I walked up the stairs slowly, hand grazing the railing I'd once gripped to keep from falling when he'd shoved me too hard during an argument. Tara's room was still painted pale yellow. Evan's door had the sticker that read "Private, trespassers will be zapped." My room had been repainted, but I still found the corner of the baseboard where the wood had been warped from the shoebox I used to hide our notes. The floorboard was still loose. I pulled it up and found nothing but dust. That was when it hit me. I'd never really come back for closure. I came back to confirm that it was over. Later that night, I drove to the small park where we used to have Sunday picnics. Where my mother would lay out a blanket and tell us to smile big for the camera while my father stood behind her, arms crossed, watching. Always watching. That park had once felt like a break. Now it just looked small. The bench we used to sit on had someone else's name carved into it now. KJ forever. I sat there until the sun went down, replaying the trial in my head. The prosecution's strategy had been deliberate and slow. They didn't open with the bruises or the footage. They opened with my voice. My testimony. They made the jury look at me. Hear me. They used his own cameras, his prideful evidence of discipline, to show how control had been masked as care. I remember watching his face during the recordings. He didn't flinch, didn't look ashamed. He looked irritated, as if we'd embarrassed him more than betrayed him. He didn't speak much at the trial. His lawyer did all the talking. When he did speak, it was short. I don't remember that, or that's not how it happened. The usual, but one moment stood out. They played a clip from a Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. He had been lecturing Evan over a dropped glass. It was nothing, just a broken cup. But my father went on for 8 minutes, listing every failure, every disappointment, telling Evan that he was lucky to even be part of our family. That other kids would have been shipped off by now. In the recording, you could hear me off camera, whispering something in our code. Evan laughed, nervous and small. My father didn't notice, but the jury did. That moment, that quiet act of defiance, shifted the entire room. After the trial, one of the jurors approached me. Older man, probably late 60s. Said nothing at first, just handed me a folded slip of paper. On it was a quote from a book I didn't recognize: "The truth is rarely loud. It sits in the corner, bleeding, waiting for someone to see it." I still have that paper in my wallet. College ended up taking a backseat. I deferred for a year. Then another. I didn't have it in me to sit through lectures about literature or ethics when my own story felt like a fractured novel I hadn't finished reading. I got a job at a used bookstore instead. Quiet, predictable, smelled like old pages and dust. The kind of place where silence felt like safety. Jonah visited a lot. We didn't talk about the trial anymore. We talked about music, plans, the absurdity of how small-town politics tried to bury the story once it stopped being convenient. He once joked, "You realize you're going to be someone else's, have you heard about that case? Story for years, right?" I did. I knew that, but I didn't want to be the case. I wanted to be the person who came out of it. I just didn't know how to start. That fall, I started volunteering at a youth shelter. Not out of a desire to give back, that language always felt too polished. Too hollow. I just wanted to be around kids who knew. Who understood what it was like to be told your truth didn't matter. That your voice only counted when it was convenient. I never talked about my own past. Just listened, offered quiet nods. Sometimes silence is the best way to say, "I believe you." One girl, 12 years old, sat across from me one day and said, "I don't think I'm real when I'm home." I nearly broke, because I knew exactly what she meant. I taught her how to write in code. Not mine, not the one my siblings and I used. A new one she could build herself. She called it quiet talk. A way to say things without saying them. I still have one of her notes. It reads, in symbols, "Today I existed and nobody yelled." People talk about survival like it's a finish line. Like once you're out, you're safe. But it's not like that. Survival is a loop, a constant relearning of your own worth. Some days you feel like you've made it. Other days, a smell or a word or a look pulls you right back into that old room, that old silence, that old version of yourself. But over time, the pull gets weaker. And your new voice, the one you built from ashes and notes and evidence, starts to feel more real than the silence ever did. I moved out of Indiana the following year. Not in a rush, not with ceremony. Just packed a car with what I owned, told Jonah I'd send him postcards, and drove east. No big announcements. No social media post with a sunset caption. Just quiet miles and the sound of old mixtapes. I ended up in Vermont. A small town near Montpelier where nobody knew my name or my story. That anonymity was a gift I hadn't realized I needed. It was the first time in my life I could be someone without carrying the footnotes of trauma into every room. I found a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The place smelled like sugar in the mornings and burnt coffee at night. It was perfect. I got a job at the local library. Part-time, mostly shelving, sometimes helping kids find books or assisting the older regulars with the computers. I didn't tell anyone about the trial, or the footage, or who my father was. I just became the quiet new guy who reads a lot. One afternoon, about 2 months after moving in, a man came in looking for books on local hiking trails. He was maybe in his late 40s, wearing a denim jacket with a rip in the sleeve. He smiled at me like he already knew me. "You're from Indiana, right?" he asked. The question stopped me cold. I nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I think this is yours." I didn't touch it. "Who are you?" I asked. "Just a delivery guy," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your dad's been writing again. Found some creative ways to get mail to you." I didn't open the envelope. I just stared at it until he left. Inside were 3 letters, all written on yellowed notebook paper. No signature, just paragraph after paragraph of twisted logic. Claims that I'd misunderstood everything. That he was trying to toughen us up for the world. That he never laid a hand on us without reason. He ended one letter with, "You'll see one day. When you're a father." I burned them in the sink that night. That was the first time I cried in years. Not out of fear, not even from sadness. It was grief. The grief of realizing that someone you once prayed would change never even wanted to. I didn't tell Jonah about the letters until weeks later. His response was quiet. "He doesn't get to narrate your story anymore," he said. "That voice doesn't belong in your life now." And he was right. But trauma doesn't always listen to logic. I started dreaming again. Not nightmares, exactly. Just echoes. I'd see my father in places he didn't belong, behind a tree on a hiking trail. Standing across the street, riding the same bus. Always watching, never speaking. My therapist called it residual threat. The brain keeps scanning for danger even when you're safe. Because safety feels like a trap when you've spent your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I created rituals, small things. I started every morning with the same tea. I journaled at the same time every night. I built patterns to remind myself that I was in control now. That my world could be predictable, and not because I feared punishment, but because I chose it. And I kept writing. I started documenting the story. Not for publication, not for attention, just to make sense of it. I'd sit in the window nook of my apartment and write about the smell of his cologne. About the sound the belt made when he pulled it off the hook. About the way my mother used to say, "He's just tired, baby," like that excused everything. But as I wrote, something strange happened. I stopped writing about him. The pages slowly became less about what he did and more about who I became. How Tara's drawings were always filled with hidden messages. How Evan would hum to himself when things got too quiet. How our made-up language had become the only honest thing in our house. I wrote about Jonah, about the way he never asked me to explain my silence. About the time he sat with me for 5 hours when I couldn't stop shaking after a phone call from a blocked number. He didn't ask who it was. Just held my hand and played music. That winter, I submitted one of my pieces, a fictionalized version of my childhood, to a literary magazine under a pseudonym. They published it. The story was called Chalk Lines. It was about 3 siblings who drew invisible borders around themselves to survive a house that looked perfect from the outside. It ended with the line, "Sometimes survival looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like 3 kids teaching each other to speak in ways no one else could hear." The magazine didn't know it was mine. But I did. That was enough. A year passed. Then too, life got quieter, better. I made friends. Not many, but good ones. People who didn't pry, who didn't need to know everything to care. I started dating again. Carefully, slowly. Trust was a muscle I hadn't used in years, and it ached every time I tried. But I kept trying. One relationship lasted nearly 10 months. Her name was Claire. She was a photographer with a laugh that made strangers smile. She didn't know the full story, but she knew I carried something heavy. One night, I told her about the house. About the cameras. About the letters. She didn't try to fix me. She just said, "You're here now. That's what matters." It didn't work out, not because of the past, but because sometimes people are chapters, not endings. And that's okay. Jonah came to visit that summer. We hiked, we read, we watched old movies like we used to in college. One night, sitting under the stars, he asked, "Do you ever think you'll go back? Not just to visit, I mean really go back. Confront it all." I didn't answer at first. Then I said, "I don't think you always need to revisit the fire to prove you survived it." He nodded, and we sat in the silence. It's been nearly 5 years now since I last heard from my father. No more letters, no more visitors. I don't know where he is. Don't care to. Some nights I still dream about that house, though. Not as a prison, but as a museum. Empty, quiet, a place that once held something terrible, now just echoing with nothingness. I think healing looks like that sometimes. Not fireworks, not closure, just a gradual emptiness where the noise used to be. It was early fall when I saw my mother again. Not planned, not expected, just one of those coincidences that feels staged by the universe for no one's benefit. I had taken a short trip down to Boston to visit a friend. We were walking near the public garden when I caught a glimpse of someone through the crowd. A profile, a way of standing. I stopped cold. My friend kept walking, laughing about something, until he turned and saw my face. "What is it?" he asked. I didn't answer. I stepped forward, weaving through the tourists, toward the woman sitting alone on a bench. Hands folded neatly in her lap. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray. But it was her. Same posture. Same navy coat she used to wear to church. I stood a few feet away, uncertain if I'd say anything. Then she looked up. Her expression didn't change. No shock, no fear, no relief. Just recognition. Like I was someone she'd left behind at a train station years ago and remembered only in passing. "Hello," she said softly. I sat beside her. Not close. Just within speaking distance. The pause between us stretched too long before she finally broke it. "I heard you moved. Vermont?" I nodded. "How do you know?" I asked around. Quietly. She folded her hands tighter. "I wasn't sure you'd want to be found." "I didn't," I said. She nodded like she expected that. A silence followed that neither of us knew how to fill. So I filled it with the only question that mattered. "Did you know?" She didn't look at me. I knew. Pieces. I turned toward her. "Which pieces?" Her voice was quieter now. "The belt. The yelling. The fear." I saw it. But I kept thinking, if I just stayed quiet, kept the peace, it wouldn't get worse. That maybe he'd calm down. That maybe I could manage it. You didn't manage it, I said. She flinched. I know. I wanted to scream, to ask why she didn't run. Why she didn't shield us. Why she let him tear us down day after day while she stood in the kitchen humming hymnals. But I didn't, because her eyes were already full of a guilt deeper than anything I could throw at her. So I asked something else. Why did you leave town? She looked down at her hands. Because I couldn't face what I let happen. I didn't know how to exist in a place where everyone knew I did nothing. You still think doing nothing is better than doing the wrong thing? No, she said. I think I made it worse. I used silence like it was armor. But it was just a blindfold. She pulled something out of her purse. A small photograph, the three of us, sitting on the porch when I was maybe 9. I remember that day. My father had just left for work. We had ice cream, laughed too loudly, and Tara had drawn stars on Evan's cheeks with a marker. My mother had taken the picture. She handed it to me. I look at this a lot, she said. I tell myself maybe there were moments you were okay. There were, I said. But they don't erase the rest. She nodded. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believed her, but I didn't forgive her. Not yet, maybe not ever. Some absences leave bruises too deep for apology to reach. Still, I pocketed the photo. I don't know why. We sat for a while longer. She told me she was living outside Worcester now, working part-time at a floral shop. She hadn't spoken to my father in over 2 years. He writes me, she said. But I don't answer. I stood. She didn't ask for a hug. Didn't try to hold my hand. Just said, thank you for sitting. I nodded, turned, and walked back into the crowd. That night, I sat in my motel room staring at the photo. It felt like holding a memory with both hands. One part warmth, one part warning. I remembered Evan's laugh, Tara's sharp, silly grin. My own face, quieter, more careful. Like I already knew I had to be. I texted both of them. We hadn't all been in the same room since the sentencing. Evan was hesitant, Tara more open. Eventually, we agreed, Thanksgiving. Neutral ground. A cabin near the Blue Ridge Mountains, halfway between all three of us. We called it Truce Territory. The cabin was small, old, but clean. The kind of place where the Wi-Fi barely works and the clocks tick louder than they should. We brought board games, snacks, old playlists. At first, the conversation was awkward. Safe topics. Work, weather, Evan's cat, Tara's students. Then, around the second night, something shifted. Tara brought out the old notebook. The one with our code. She placed it in the center of the table. We all stared at it. I found this when I moved, she said. I thought I lost it. But, it was tucked inside a copy of The Outsiders. Remember that book? I laughed. You highlighted every time someone cried in it. I needed proof it was okay, she said. Evan took the notebook gently. Flipped through it like it might fall apart in his hands. We should make a new one, he said quietly. Different code, different story. And we did. That weekend, we started a new system. Less about hiding, more about remembering. We wrote letters to our younger selves. Notes of protection, of reassurance. We didn't share all of them. Some were too raw, but we knew. We understood. We weren't writing to fix the past. We were writing so the future wouldn't forget. That weekend, I slept better than I had in years. I dreamed not of the house. Not of my father, but of sitting on a porch somewhere warm, passing a notebook between siblings, each writing a line, laughing, correcting each other, making space. I woke up and the silence felt good, real, mine. The final piece didn't fall into place with some grand event or courtroom twist. It arrived in a manila envelope, no return address, no markings except for my name, handwritten in a tidy, deliberate script, the kind that made your stomach feel something before your mind caught up. It was February. Snow still blanketed the town, thick and quiet like a secret. I found the envelope wedged into the doorframe when I came home from the library. For a moment, I just stood there, coat still on, heart ticking slower than it should have. Inside were 3 things. The first, a single-page letter. Not from my father. From a man named Charles Eden. I had never heard the name before. He introduced himself as a retired social worker. Said he'd been assigned our case once, briefly, back when I was 7. I remember the house, he wrote. Your father was convincing. Your mother said the right things. And you were silent. I should have seen through it. I didn't. I'm sorry. He went on to say that after the trial made local headlines, something about it had stuck with him. He'd started pulling old files. Reading, connecting dots. Quietly, carefully. And then he wrote, there was a report that never made it into your case file. A phone call placed by a neighbor in October 1999. The caller reported yelling, loud bangs, what they thought sounded like crying. The report was logged but never pursued. I've enclosed a copy. The second item was that report. 1 page, black text on fading gray paper. The timestamp, 10:47 p.m. Caller, anonymous. Address, our old one. Comments, possible domestic disturbance. Loud shouting, possible child distress. Notes section, no follow-up needed. Officer familiar with the family. Marked as resolved. The officer listed? My father's old college friend. The one who always showed up to barbecues. The one who once gave me a ride home from a soccer game and told me, your dad's a tough guy, but you'll thank him someday. I sat with that page for a long time. Because that was the night Evan had hidden in the crawl space behind the laundry room. The night Tara had cut her palm on the broken dish trying to clean up before our father came downstairs. The night I had crawled under my bed and counted to 500 to keep from crying. Someone heard us, and no one came. The third item in the envelope was a photograph. A blurry Polaroid, taken from a distance. Our house. At night, one light on upstairs. A shape, small, silhouetted, visible behind the curtain. No note, no caption. I don't know who took it. But someone had seen. I didn't show the photo to my siblings. Not right away. I didn't know how. What would I say? Look, proof we weren't invisible? That felt hollow. So I kept it in the same box with the old notes, the juror's quote, the newspaper clippings. My archive, my record. But it changed something. Because for so long I had believed we went unseen. That our pain evaporated in that house like steam on bathroom mirrors, foggy, impermanent, gone once the door opened. But someone had witnessed it. And even if they didn't save us then, the fact that it was recorded, remembered, mattered. That memory is what saves us now. Weeks later, I wrote a letter to Charles Eden. I thanked him, not for the apology, though that mattered, but for trying again. For revisiting something long buried not because he had to, but because he couldn't rest until he did. People like him are rare. People who go back into the fire, just to see if anyone's still trapped. I told him he wasn't too late. That sometimes, the smallest acknowledgement feels like rescue. I'm 33 now. I don't flinch at sudden noises anymore. I don't jump when someone raises their voice across the street. Most nights, I sleep all the way through. I still work at the library. I run the youth writing workshop on Thursdays. The kids bring in journals filled with wild stories, time machines, haunted attics, talking raccoons. One girl writes only in riddles. I asked her once why, and she said, because secrets are more fun when you get to solve them. I keep her notebook on my desk. It reminds me of us. Of what we built to stay sane. Of how language, even made up, can be survival. I don't talk much about my past anymore. But I keep the story close. Because it's not just mine. It's Evan's. It's Tara's. It's Jonah's. It's every quiet kid sitting in a too loud house wondering if anyone will ever knock on the door. It's proof that escape isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a library card, a cup of tea, a friend who sits beside you in silence and doesn't ask you to speak before you're ready. Sometimes the person who shows you your worth doesn't say it out loud. They just stay. They just believe you, before you believe yourself. The other day, I found a note taped to the library desk. Folded like our old ones. No signature, just one sentence in neat handwriting. I know what you lived through. I'm living it now. Your story made me stay alive this week. Thank you. No name, no clue who left it. But I'll keep it forever. Because maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not forgiving, just choosing to stay. And teaching others how to, too.